I call this meeting of the Area Plan Commission to order. Do the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call.
Darren Price,
Here.
Leota,
Here.
Brian Durham,
Here.
Ed Harrell, Gary Naylor, Kathy Rhodes,
Here.
Brian Robb,
Here.
Bill Mackey,
Here.
Brian Hensley, Bill McDaniel,
Present.
Jeff Westling,
Present.
and myself.
Have approval of the minutes of the June 25th meeting?
I didn't get them
You didn't
done.
get them done?
Mhm.
Okay, and the public hearing's not going to happen because they didn't get the ad in the paper in time. So we're talking about 2020 APC projects, revised priority projects, rules of procedure.
And also the zoning code. The, didn't send,
You're gonna have to really speak up on TV, it's muffled, real bad.
Okay,
No one can hear what you're saying.
well, we're 6 foot apart, so I can take this off.
Or if you're speaking, just hold it out, whichever.
I'd rather take it off if I can. It's hooked up with all my appliances here.
all right. So it's two things, of course, is didn't get people the copy of, at one point Carrie did some research, but I haven't gotten that to everybody yet as far as the rules of procedure. What I sent out to everybody were sections of the, over a period of time, I started working on fits and starts with reformatting the zoning code. And what I sent was the descriptions of the zoning districts, put all the different uses, whether it's permitted uses, special exceptions, all into one section. Okay, behind that should have been the various development requirements for the special exceptions and the parking standards. Did I include the home occupation part in there? Okay, now yeah, and also the home occupation, special exception development standards and general, and the performance standards. And part of that goes back to the request that Mr. Naylor made, is to look at the zoning code to identify the various things that may be hindrance, been referred to as hindrances to economic development within the zoning code itself. To identify what could be changed, if there's any special exceptions, that should no longer actually be a special exception, should be changed into permitted use. And part of that will be thought and discussion that the Area Plan Commission will need to have, which will revolve around the, okay, why is something a special exception? Because the general idea with the special exception is that it needs an additional layer of review because there is a potential in certain locations for it to be have a negative effect on other properties in the area, and that's why the special exception exists. So some of them might no longer, in some districts, might not need to be one, and some of these other uses can actually, okay, but does it make sense if it is a permitted use to then have, okay, for this particular use, what do we need to have as far as anything more than just general setbacks or other development requirements that might be appropriate, and that'd be part of the discussion. Okay, the other one that was mentioned last month, that is because as we, with the zoning board, with the variance for the parking, is that it is excessive, and it can be a significant cost of having parking standards that by far exceed realistic requirements. That's the
Is that the 150 a parking spot for every 150 square foot of retail space.
Exactly, yeah, it's and if things can be done to reduce reduce variances for parking because they're way out of line. For example, at one time, a lot of the, parking standards for the retail is based on one day of the year. The biggest single, now it would be Black Friday. But before that was for the before Black Friday, of course, was the last day of possible shopping for Christmas. So that's what it was based on. So which is why you see these huge seas of parking in a lot of cases is they really aren't always used because there's just too much requirement. And then if you have an excessive parking standard, you have, parking's expensive to install. Another thing that happens is if you have parking that exceeds what's reasonable, then, such as we have with the stormwater fees.
Same impervious.
Exactly, by having impervious surface, then there's additional cost related to that. So that's one of the things right there. Home, and of course the one with the home occupations is that it's in a lot of cases it's ancient language. Because I'm sure you've read and there's who does millinery much knows what millinery is now. So it needs to reflect really the 21st century economy with, it's, rather than home occupations, the term you're actually finding, because it's a little more broad, is home-based business. So then of course has had discussions with some plan commission members about the lists of, for example, it has all these lists of retail uses. This humongous list. I mean, you can simplify those to retail use, or, you can simplify, you can remove a lot of those, remove a lot of extra language. So we have places where in one particular, we already have places such as in some of the industrial districts where when it's allowed, in another district or other districts, it requires them to be special exceptions. So there's a lot of things to really sort through. And so part of that is so we can start moving in that direction. A big one is like I said, is I need to check on. I started actually, last couple of days, I started actually going through our rules of procedure and then copying the sections that it's referenced out of the Indiana Code and then highlighting the parts. And I'm going to do, the code has been around enough to where, I highlight a lot. I make a lot of comments, editorial comments, as I'm reviewing projects. If something could be excised or questioned, it'll be read. If something's green, that makes sense to keep for whatever reason. It starts off with the parts of what is actually required in the zoning code, in the zoning board rules of procedure. So the first part of it is the actual responsibilities, and those actually taken directly from the Indiana Code. So parts of the Indiana Code that's in it. Then there'll be some of the other things that have risen last year, as far as some of the problems, as far as some of the uses of the language. So, for example, is for the purpose of this ordinance, for the rules of procedure. Whatever term, whether it's continued or the various others, indicate that they're used interchangeably. I think something like that, if that makes sense. Because where it isn't a courtroom, it isn't a court of law, and it's that by having things a little too precise, is that it creates a problem. So we need to provide ourselves more flexibility within the ordinance. I also included the definitions, because it came out last year. There's definitions we lack. There's probably other definitions that we probably don't need. If you look at the definitions, to make it a little easier to use, to me it's a little easier to use if in some cases where, for example, agriculture-related definitions, it makes sense to have in one location. Business-related definitions make sense to be in one location, because that way you're just gonna go through. At least to me, it makes sense to do things in that manner. So I think what I would like to ask then is, because I know it is having the opportunity to get that to everybody, if everybody could really start looking at the things I provided. You can send me comments if you have any questions about anything, send comments to others. What I do recommend is if you are on, what I sent everybody was was scanned. What I'll do is I'll get everybody these on the Word document, so you can actually insert your comments or edits into the actual text. And that way, when you're contacting me with a question or a comment, send it to everybody. Every zoning board member, me, Jeff, zoning board member, plan commission member, because others may have the same question. So it's going to be more, a little more difficult for some people. Like, for example, Mr. Harrell, as far as for family health reasons with the social distancing. So others may feel that way, but I think as much as we can do this way is that it can be, it can make it a little more difficult, but as much as possible, if we could start, I think first was just start reviewing all of these things, and just mark up everything as, bleed all over it in red ink. That's okay, and that's the only way to really know what people's comments or concerns if something isn't clear. It's the only way for me to really try to help get this in a format that's going to be a little bit more business friendly. And then as we have the discussions, we really need to have some good vigorous discussions at the plan commission meetings as we go through these different parts, because this is actually, because it's a code, it's a zoning code, and people need to be aware of what's going on with it. It'll give people opportunity to say, well, what's going on with this? Because it's and I can make copies of electronically available for other people also.
Bill, I have can I, as a citizen, not as a BZA member, can I?
Yeah.
speak? Since I'm not on the board, I don't know if I don't know how that works, but, so I guess maybe, I have a few questions.
Yeah.
And maybe this was discussed at last month's meeting, but I couldn't make it to. But some of my concern, I'm confused as to why isn't the committee that was set to work on rules of procedure going forward with that?
Okay, well, that
Because
was.
I do have quite a bit of work done on it, and so
okay.
that's why I was.
Okay, well, that's one, since you weren't at the last meeting, we couldn't ask you about that, but that's one we can actually do. I think the only person who probably won't be there, Ed may not take part directly in it.
Yeah, and I don't mean necessarily even that we have in-person meetings, but the committee,
Yeah.
and you were there that day, we had a pretty vigorous discussion, had a pretty clear path of how we wanted to proceed, and honestly, you've got your plate full, and if you've got APC and BZA members who are willing to chip in and get that done, everybody's plate is full, and I think we've got a good team of folks. Brian, would you agree that that's kind of how that conversation went?
Yeah, I thought then the pandemic started and everything kind of went
Exactly.
like on everything, so.
And honestly, and that's kind of where I'm at as well, like I've got most of we talked in that meeting, just so everybody can hear, basically what we discussed is, I pulled together several different counties of rules of procedure, so I went to, I think I have 13 or 14 different rules of procedure, and just sort of parsing them out and saying, okay, this is the best of, each section, these three counties have the best of this section. Which one of these three makes sense to you?
Yeah.
That's what I've been starting to lay out. I'm about halfway through the document. And then kind of mixing and matching what works best. And then we also talked about adding in some of the other things in the rules of procedure to help you, so that you know what we as a board expect in the staff report.
Mm-hmm.
Not a prescribed, not a fill in the blank kind of thing, but a very clear, these are the things that we know, and I'm sure that there's definitely things we're gonna miss statutorily, that only you and Jeff would know.
Yeah.
But if we get the bare bones of, as a board, these are the pieces that we know we need. And sometimes there's a lot of things that we don't need that end up in there that come back to bite us.
Yeah.
And so if we can start working on making a very good outline of exactly what needs to be there and how that needs to be presented, that's what, did I represent that right, Brian?
Yes, I think
Since
so.
you're the only other.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that in that case is, if you could run with this then, and everybody who's with that committee, if you could send an email out, this is where we're at, this is where I'm at, and we're gonna pick this up as the committee.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I don't think I can get that done tomorrow, just.
Oh, no,
But
no.
on Monday, I'll be happy to send out that committee meeting, that committee, this is a new outline, this is where we're at, everything kind of went crazy, this is where I'm at in my schedule, and kind of go from there. Is that-
That would be a good thing, yeah.
So, and not that, obviously, at the end, the area planning commission looks at the thing, and you don't have to accept any of it. You can send it back to the drawing board, you can do whatever. It's just taken off of a plate like this, we're gonna take a small sliver of the pie off.
Carrie, Kathy Rhodes behind you.
Yeah, so I took it off so you could hear me, I don't know what,
But
that was rude.
I'm replacing Kay,
Uh-huh,
and so I offered to be on that committee too.
okay, I'll be happy to include you in the email then. And really, I think I did a pretty decent job recapping what we discussed. Basically, like I said, I just did a ton of research, start putting them together, and then the committee members can piece and part what they want and what makes sense to them.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, because since they didn't have a chance to have this conversation.
Yeah,
with you
and I
last month.
apologize for not, I tried to get here last month, but,
Yeah, well, it isn't always possible.
right, so, and then the other thing is that, and I don't know, not that we have to copy anybody, but I think we talked about, there's a million different ways to write the code and to write different things.
Yeah.
And again, this is a private citizen, as, my job working in other counties with other zoning codes and ordinances. What I will tell you is that we really, really, really need to work on those lists. Because, for example, what happens is if you have a list that says retail operations, and then you list out 50 different kinds of retail operations, if you miss one, then they will claim that they're not subject to that ordinance, because if you just say retail, then anything that broadly falls under retail you can catch. But if you list 50 and you didn't catch 51, that 51 is inevitably going to come to your community, and they're going to inevitably go somewhere you don't want them to go. So that's really important to work on that language. In some cases, we're way too broad. In some cases, we're way too specific.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that's also recommended, is that avoid list. It's
Yes.
just like as we went through with the sign regulations, is that one thing you want to avoid is a long list of what's allowed and what's prohibited.
Yes.
Because the more you have of actually you're spelling out with that.
Okay, and I do have one more question about the comprehensive plan.
Yep.
And I don't know, this probably, I have not discussed this with anybody else, so I may be in complete left field. But although you need a consultant to help with some of the drafting, one of the things that I've seen other communities do is every other month or every month in their area plan commission meeting, they tackle one section of the comprehensive plan continuously.
Yeah.
So, for example, if there's, and I don't know, let's say there's 20 sections in the comprehensive plan. In January, you work on this section, and then it's updated. That way, every 2 years, your plan is always updated, because a lot of the Okra grants, they're dependent on having an updated comprehensive plan, and that's kind of the jam we're in right now, is we need an updated comprehensive plan to comply with, to get those grants. And it's not anybody's fault or anything, but I think in order to stay on top of it, if we can get a plan together and get one made now, I would really encourage the Area Plan Commission to take one section every month or every other month, and at the meeting, update it, hash it out, and get that part figured out. If you stay on top of it, it'll save, maybe in 10
It'll be
or 15
continuously
years.
updated.
Yes, in 10 or 15 years, you'll probably have to hire somebody to come in and do a big plan update, but until then, as the Area Plan Commission, you've saved the community quite a bit of money, and you've given them the opportunity to continue to get the funding that's available.
Thank you very much, Carrie. You've done a lot of work, and I don't know about anybody else, but I appreciate it. And that I didn't have to do it.
Oh, I appreciate it. All right, so I think that's my 2 cents today.
It's good 2 cents, Carrie.
Thanks.
Okay, but it's the, but as is, with some other things to say, as far as then, okay, because I guess is to, it's, because we talked about, Gary said he'd be willing to, jump at the front end, as far as with the, also with the zoning code, Ed, and then others who are interested, so we can then, as some primary individuals to just push this review along,
Yeah.
because there is a lot in that zoning code that we really do have to review.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because
And I wondered if, and I don't know if there are certain sections, are there certain sections that it makes more sense for you to work on or not,
Sure.
or?
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, like, how does the board ask or direct Jeff, like, to say, there may be some things that really all they need is a little cleanup, and they don't, or maybe we can say, okay, Jeff, with these 3 sections, can you bring us 2 or 3 options on, whatever sections they are? Because, I don't know, let's say that one section is irretrievably broken.
Yep.
Let's just say it's a science section, I don't know if it is, I haven't dug that far into it. But per my last comments on the sign, we get a lot of variances on the signs, which makes me believe that there's something wrong with it. And 90% of our, 90% of what we hear is about signs, so there must be something wrong with the ordinance.
Yeah, well, there's some things with the sign regulations, we don't need anything that's a major fix.
Yeah, but it's just used as an example.
Yeah, I know you use an example because that one right there is because I don't want to wade back into that.
Yeah, so this is, regardless, like, let's just pretend, and that it may not be,
Yeah.
and there may not be a section that this works on, but for this example, let's say it's the sign ordinance, and we go to Jeff and we say, it is irretrievably broken, and it will take a ton of time to figure it out how to fix it.
Yeah.
So can you just bring us 2 or 3 options that work in other communities? And then let the board say, okay, we really like this one, or nope, none of those. How does that process work? Is that, I'm asking procedurally, like, does the board just ask Jeff to do that? Like,
Well, yeah, that's the sort of thing where the board really instruct Jeff to move forward with that, basically, approve
so
moving
what I'm
forward.
hearing is you need a motion.
We will, but I think we want to think of quite how we're going to phrase that and then deal with that. Because, because we need to work on some serious, because, as I said, I know there's things that are broken in the zoning code. There's things in how as we to then also move forward then with the comprehensive plans. And there's a lot of things with both of those
Right.
that really need a lot of work.
And that's why I was trying to figure out, like, if we divide and conquer, Brian, did you hear my proposal about, about potentially asking Jeff on a few sections, and I don't know who should identify those, whether that's the area plan commission or whether that's Jeff himself.
Yeah,
I think
Jeff, is that something you could prioritize?
It's absolutely, and here's kind of how I would recommend it, is maybe if each of you, as you're looking at the ordinance, don't hesitate to shoot me an email and say, I've always looked at this section and I have a problem with it. And then I can kind of say, hey guys, here's some sections that people have shown some issues with, here's some revisions I have written, and I can just start bringing those. I can just start bringing whatever I can get done for the next meeting and just start bringing them to your attention. And then eventually we get 2 or 3, I don't think you want to do 10 or 15 sections or something crazy, but if you got a section or 2 and we want to have a public hearing and try to change it, then we can do that.
Well, could I make a motion that, Jeff, you would prioritize some and see what happens, get started on it, and then go from there instead of just,
Sure.
so like, motion.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Duly noted, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys, I appreciate it.
Yeah. 'Cause I guess one thing we could do is then, if one lens to look through is gonna be with, what Gary was trying to move toward. That might be a lens to also look through things at. Yeah. Because right now in what I provided with the reformat, it is the actual same language and the same just moved around that's in the current zoning code. Because the idea was to get in a more usable format, yeah, and as things are in a more usable format, then, yeah, change the things that need to be changed within that format. For example, one thing we don't have is, I think board members or on the board, we ought to at least recall the difficulty with where to shoehorn the airport overlay district. Because there's no room for additional things like that. So for example, one of the things that's in there is making room for overlay districts. Would be the airport overlay district. Okay, should the city council then desire that the various historic districts adopted by the city of Connersville be made overlay districts in the zoning code? Because in the historic districts, you can require certain things or want certain things done, but if it's something that needs an action on the part of the area plan commission director as far as with the permit process, it needs to be in the zoning code. So because a city ordinance cannot mandate me, because even though it's for both the city and the county, it's a county department, as far as mandating the county to go ahead and enforce a city code. So so that would be the sort of thing which would be, for example, on the city to say, well, we kind of need to do this, to make it a little more enforceable as far as permits or anything else that goes with that.
Bill, I kind of went over that, and like the overlay district, it said kind of like natural resources. So would that mean like your parks, like you have the Schrader Weaver or Mary Grave Group?
Yeah, there'd be things like that. You could also treat the floodplain regulations, although they're mandated through state and then also federal to certain standards, because you can also treat the floodplains also as an overlay district, because you have current regulations that fall underneath, but you have this whole other set, which you gotta do with the overlay is like lands on top of those. So just like you have the basic zoning district regulations, but the airport overlay district has additional rules that goes with it in order to protect the operations and then also safety related to the airport operations. So it's just some additional things that you have to do, which is one of the things we had to do with, one of the first things I had to do with Mr. Hartzell when they requested their tower. Was one of the first things was to then go through this, through with the FAA and supply the information, the height of the tower, the elevation related to the Connersville Airport. Then you have to run then through the FAA. Is this going to require then them submitting something to the FAA because of the height of the tower and where it sticks up into the airspace? So that's just the sort of thing that you actually have to look at in addition to it. It's an additional protection for certain resources you want to protect. Some places have their wellhead protection districts as overlay districts, things along those lines. So historic districts are frequently done in that manner also. Okay. So, because like I said, things having to do with parking, I mean, you're talking about something that's broken. That's something really is broken. It's and then some of the things in the special exceptions no doubt are.
Yes. That's my favorite part, is the special exception.
Yes. And then there's some things that looking through all the various performance standards, some of them redundant, really aren't needed. And those are all there to how certain types of activities operate so that they don't cause nuisances, whether it's electronic emissions, things like that. Noise, electronic emissions, smoke, things like that.
Bill, I like certain accessory uses
Yes.
that are permitted, and you're
Yeah.
like, without really any definitions or rules or
Yeah.
things like that in what
Yeah.
that means.
Yeah, exactly, and that's another one of them, is that, is you're also going through these things, if something isn't defined that needs to be defined, you need to define it. Such as we found out the whole thing with, public use facilities. So, it's so if you don't have certain things along those lines, we really need to get certain things defined that we don't have. There are certain things in there that we probably don't need in there, such as the Ringelmann number smoke index. We have requirements in there for, noise. That's like, as far as, but on the other hand is that I don't have the equipment and I don't have any of the actual training, anything else to actually inform noises such as industrial noises through the zoning code. So there are certain things that actually require a lot of special equipment to measure. And certain things like that don't really make sense to actually have defined.
I was just thinking, we have a noise ordinance, noise levels associated with certain parts of our zoning code, but we don't have a bark ordinance.
Yeah.
So I just thought that, sorry,
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm like,
And, it gets into some of the things then there's other things that, I think some people have heard me complain that there's certain things in the zoning code where over time, a lot of zoning codes have also become de facto nuisance codes. And it really does bug me. Because because the nuisance side of things, or the nuisance codes really should be city and county codes, because nuisance codes the zoning code isn't really supposed to be getting down to that level of micromanaging every single little thing that everybody actually does. And those are things that really should fall within nuisance ordinances.
The city does have a noise ordinance
Yep.
that involves with dog barking.
Do
But
they?
that's just
Just the
citywide,
city.
right?
Yeah. And so there's things like that which it's for certain things as a nuisance code, it's kind of like using a cannon.
right, yeah, gotcha, agreed.
You need something a little more delicately refined for dealing with problems, whether it's noises, parking, things like that, junk properties.
Having more than two campers at your house. You don't have right now, our zoning code says you can only have two campers at a house for no more than 72 hours, so.
And there's a lot of things like that. There's
You
the
also
other.
can't park it in your driveway if your driveway's in the front of your
Exactly.
house.
There's another one that's in there, of course, is most of us have lived long enough to see the change in the rise of the actual independent truck driver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with the way the zone code is currently written, well, where's this guy gonna keep it? Because it's now his actual home it's his personal truck, it's not the company, as all that's been, all those responsibilities have been then dumped on individual drivers instead of a company. So there's things like that to look at too, because that's in the parking also, things like that. Yeah, Brand started becoming kind of passionate about things in that accessory uses. And I appreciate it. So if you really want to, and you, Darren and I, as we want to start working through that, we can keep working through that too. Because it isn't irretrievably broken, but there's a lot of problems in it. Okay. Now, it was a lot, and it was a very short order of time to get that to everybody. So I didn't really expect, full comprehension or anything else. But the main one is just really start familiarizing yourself with these things. And, the more familiar you are, the more you can say, Bill, Jeff, everybody else. Hell, it doesn't make sense. And like I said, Gary pointed out, definitions are key, because that's the guide and the key to you interpreting, one of the guides and keys to interpreting your zoning code. It's one of those. Anybody had any questions about these or the opaqueness of my description?
I think some of the things that have been said have been helpful as to what we need to look at and
Okay, I appreciate that.
what is
Yeah.
considered, that we need to consider and need to do a little bit more surveying or perusing over.
Yeah, I think so.
So that'll help a lot for the next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, because I'll be here for the next meeting and of course the next two meetings, of course, with the change in the schedule. But, oh, hey, Bill, did you have a chance to review that contract? Okay, so if you could do that, so the next, so at the first meeting for the August, I can get it to the commissioners for approval. Yep. And while I'm gone on my vacation, is Mr. Crawford is going to handle the inspections. And since he used to be my inspector. Okay.
So we on to the director's report?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't have anything else.
I need a motion to approve the director's report.
So done.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All against, same. There being none, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
One thing, Leo, referring back to the director's report.
Okay.
The number of building permits up substantially over the year. The amount of construction that's going on in the city and in the county. We drive around. I like to just cruise through town, whatever, drive around for hours, and just seeing the number of people who are making vast improvements to properties that I never thought anybody would ever make an improvement on. It's nice to see people spending money and trying to make their properties better, having that, pride of ownership in their property.
I was excited to see that we had 3 single-family housing going up.
Yeah, so and, well, one of them that we had is also, actually, 2 of the houses since the start of the 7 are, rebuilt, post-fire rebuilds. And most of them are, they really aren't, and they're all specific homes for specific people, so there isn't any spec construction, but there are other things going on. The city of Connersville, they did get the permit for the, another solar project, but it's gonna be for the new EMS location. So I think that's the last one with the city, and they're continuing their progress for the ones that putting in the fields related to the transfer station. So, yeah, so there's just a lot of small things going on, a lot of people doing upgrading electric. There's a lot of little small projects, but there's still a lot of things that people are doing.
You look at last year in June, we had 8 permits issued, and this
Yeah.
year we had 41 issued in June.
Yeah. And 6 of those also, it has to do with and 6 of those were, and there's a total of $60,000 of estimated construction costs for different places out in the county. If anybody's seen these, it's different places out in the county that, in the right-of-way by some of the, within the utility right-of-way, you're seeing these new little frames with the electric power. And those are investments on the part of Frontier related to DSL. So Frontier is also slowly expanding DSL through other parts of the county. So that's good news also. But there's still a lot of the county that still needs improved broadband access.
Very good.
I'll make that motion to adjourn. Yeah.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
APC is adjourned.
Okay, I now declare the July 23rd, 2020 Board of Zoning meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Do the roll call, please.
Carrie Simpkins.
Here.
Bill Crawford.
Here.
Jeff Fisher.
Here.
Brian Durham.
Here.
Leota King.
Here.
Bill McDaniel.
Present.
Jeff Westling.
Present.
And myself.
Do we have those minutes?
No.
No. Okay. Next on the minute was to approve the June 25th minutes, but we don't have those presently. Okay. Next on the agenda is the public hearing continued, petition number 15024 for the Connersville Group LLC, address 700 East Fifth. Okay, someone want to come up and kind of talk about what they want to do?
Yeah.
Good evening, my name is Andrew Rossell with AR Engineering. I'm representing the Connersville Group. I guess the existing the existing seller, Connersville Group has option to purchase on that, assuming that all approvals would be in place, and then they would purchase the property to redevelop it. Shane Kaufman's here with Connersville Group that can answer any questions that I can, or from the owner side. I believe you all should have a copy of the site plan that we submitted. I don't know, Bill, do they have a?
Yeah, I
recent
did
copy?
include the updated copy.
The updated copy.
Which got rid of the length of the parking space variance. It's down to 2 variances.
Right, so the variances that we submitted for originally were the parking number, the parking size along the east side, where it kind of pinched down, and then also the green space. In the latest plan that you have, we were able to get the 9 by 20 foot parking spaces, and therefore we do not need that. The first reduction or request that we have is a reduction from 73 spaces down to 30. That is based on a calculation in the ordinance of based on 1 space per 125 square foot of net floor area. So that equates to 73 spaces for our use for a retail store based on the ITE and some other ordinances. We see ordinances that require 1 per 100. We see some that require 1 per 300 or 400. So the norm is about 1 per 200 or 1 per 300, somewhere in that range. So that equates to about 30 spaces. That works for our tenant, even in their busiest times, and they have over 15,000 stores, maybe even 16,000 stores now.
Okay, just briefly, could you explain what ITE is to people?
Oh, sure. That's it's a manual that basically defines uses and the requirements for parking. It also helps with trip generation for traffic studies, and basically that's what we use to kind of guide ourselves, both on parking. There's a lot of different societies out there and different transportation groups and planning groups and everything like that. So, a lot of them are geared more towards heavy retail. We're more like medium or light. same with other uses as well. So, so based on that, obviously, there's a lot of pavement out there now, and we really wanna, not that we couldn't keep that in and, provide all the spaces, it's just, the need is not there, so we hate to put more impervious down or keep the impervious area, cause that's detrimental to all kinds of things in the environment, stormwater, you know, heat, global warming, so, you know, all that we would rather turn into green space, or in this case, we have a small area back there for a truck to turn around. There were some additional questions that were answered, and I think you may all have that in your packet. And then stormwater, I think, you know, I'm not gonna touch on a lot of that, but, you know, if we're able to reduce the parking areas, then the stormwater, would generate less stormwater, I guess, slower, if you will. If you have pavement, it's obviously gonna run off, to either a storm sewer or the river a lot faster than if you have green area. If anybody has questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, you know, we could go through specific items on the list, or if Bill, you know any that I didn't touch on.
Yeah, well, if you could, relate a little bit to, the two requests, how they relate to our criteria.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you can't do that, it's also for the board members, anybody else is here, and then anybody else who's gonna be watching television.
Okay, so on the parking spaces, I kinda went through that in detail. But there is room, in the future if, say, the use were to change or something, I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but, you know, I gotta address that, for you guys. You know, there is room, sufficient room for additional spaces if the use were to ever change. As far as, the parking space size, we were able to meet that, and we feel that we have sufficient parking number to meet our needs. If there was a problem with the amount of parking out there, it would hurt our tenant, because, you know, a customer, if they can't find a space or it looks congested, then most likely they're gonna leave, and that's not what our tenant wants. As far as the green space, we do show 15 feet along the west side. That's to meet the building setback. Along the east side, we are neck down to about 3 feet because of the setback, the building width, the sidewalk, and then the drive. We're neck down to a couple feet at that pinch point, and we had planned on putting in a 6-foot tall screening fence there to help as a buffer there. And knowing that it's being used currently as residential, so we put a 6-foot tall screening fence along the east side that wraps around the property.
Okay. And what about with the, on the west, because on the west side, of course, there's a lot of residential uses also.
Immediately west.
Well, you have one vacant lot, yeah, then you have a series of them, yeah.
So that's something, you know, we can look at, you know, if we wanna if we'd rather put a fence in, or some screening, you know, vegetation, some trees, some coniferous trees maybe. It is kind of it's kind of an odd shaped lot for being in the city. You know, it's long and pretty skinny up front, but then opens up in the back. It does have a lot of grade change, which is even a little bit more odd because it drops down and then climbs back up. So there is some challenges on the site, and obviously a retailer wants to be as close to the highway as possible, and there's also the floodplain in the rear. That's the other constraint.
Yeah, because it would result in significant additional fill having to be brought into the site.
Yeah, we're gonna try to limit the amount of fill. We do have to set the finished floor above the base flood elevation, so that would require some fill, but we're gonna try to generate as much of that on site as possible.
What about as far as like the handicap parking, Bill? You can help me, remind me how many parking spaces for handicap versus regular patrons?
Yeah, so I don't know if you know that off the
Oh,
top
I don't
of
know
your
that
head.
off the top of my head, but it's,
25 to 50 is 2 handicap spaces, and 1 needs to be van accessible. And we do show 2 for our 30 spaces and a 10-foot wide aisle between those. So
I couldn't remember what that number was without looking it up.
yeah, it's one space per up to 24, and then 25 to I think 49 is 2 spaces.
And that's a state requirement or
It's
in our code?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
the
it's
88
fed, yeah.
code.
It's fed and then it's readopted at the state level.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we have, yeah, it was at the state level.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Most building codes
Yeah,
adopt that.
Yeah, because it's section 13, I think.
Okay.
I don't know if you had a chance to read through. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, the gentleman in the back, if, in a minute, they'll,
Okay, yeah, I think I don't wanna go on too long, but the staff report that was prepared is very detailed and lays it out, you know, nicely of the, request, kind of the analysis and the recommendation.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, anybody from the public want to comment?
Yes.
Come up to,
I own the property right next to him, 710,
okay.
that they're
Oh,
proposing.
could you state your name, please? for
Art
the record?
Baldwin. I live here in Connersville all my life.
All right.
I've owned that property for 22 years. I've never had a problem with anybody that owned that other property. Years ago, the city abandoned the alley in the back, which when they done that, they landlocked my property. The only way I've got moving anything in and out of that is through that rear entrance. Now, if he puts a chain link fence or something all the way down around the property, he's gonna landlock me where I can't get in, can't get out. And if my building was to ever catch fire in the front of that building, I couldn't get out, where am I going? My question is, if they put a chain link fence back there all the way around, can they give me a gate access to my back property?
You probably want like a right of way to where you have,
I just need to be able to get to my back property.
but that's something that they would need to work with him on that, right?
I was gonna say, I
That's
don't.
not an issue for, that sounds like it's a civil issue, not an issue for BZA.
Right, I mean, we hear you, and I think clearly it's a need. The problem is I don't know that it's something that we can, I mean, I feel like that's an issue that needs to be fixed in the deed, an easement or a gentleman's agreement.
Well, what you're gonna do is vote on the zoning, ain't you?
Yeah, but this is
What's
what
the
we're,
sense of zoning it
no,
if something else would happen and
Well, that's,
but what we're gonna do is we're gonna say yes or no, that this is okay, but all we're granting is the
Reduction
if
of
we
funding.
say nothing, if we don't do anything, they have the right tomorrow. If we say no to it, they have the right tomorrow to fence you off that property because they own it.
I do. Yeah, that's true.
So that's why, like, no matter what we say, that's still a potential that you need to address.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel for you. I'm actually oddly just found that out about my own property today. So, you know, I
But
think.
you know, if a person needs to get the back of his property, he's gonna get to it.
but what we're voting on today is not even anything to do with.
Well,
something.
Bill just told me to come back.
Well, yeah,
No.
well, that's good that you're making your comments, I think, But that's something you probably should address with them
I
legally.
talked to them too, and they
Legally.
were supposed to send me an updated thing, what they was gonna do, and I never did hear nothing else.
We didn't change anything on the site.
I think what I'm hearing to help address your concern is if we make a motion, it would not include a fencing requirement. That's the only thing we can do to help you.
Yeah.
It wouldn't, potentially, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how the
So
board feels
who
about
would I
that.
go to talk to?
Yeah, because the idea with the privacy fence is a courtesy to screen views and screen vision.
Okay,
I would try to get an easement.
well,
Agreement.
it was the city's fault for ever doing away with the alley.
Right. And
I know that we can address a 30-year-old issue with an alley.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
I get it.
it needs to be fixed, and I feel for you, but I just don't know, it's just not anything. Again, if we say no to this, it doesn't help you any. If we say yes to it, it doesn't help you any. There's really not much.
That's something you need to work legally with them, not
Yeah.
through our board.
Correct.
And I'm not trying to pass it on, that's the law. Okay, so the first variance is on the,
You know, I think we need to deal with both of them individually.
yeah, that's for sure. The first variance is on the 73 parking spaces down to 30. And does anybody on the board have any comments after listening to what they heard?
Don't we have to close the public hearing?
Yeah.
We'd have
Yeah.
to do the public hearing.
If there's
before-
anybody else.
If there's
Does
anybody
anybody
else.
else have any other comments?
Okay,
So I move to close the public hearing.
okay.
A second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Means the arraignment's closed. Okay, so the first variance is 73 to 30, so we want to vote on that.
I move to grant the variance, relieving them from the 73 parking spaces down to 30.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the second part is the variance seeking relief from the green space parking. Any discussion?
Any questions?
Okay. This portion's closed and ready for a vote.
I move to grant the variance on the construction of the drive within the green space.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion made and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Director's report.
I'll make a motion to accept the director's report.
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded to accept the director's report as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Looks like next on the agenda, unless anybody has some comments they want to make or something they want to bring up, is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.